My ex refused a paternity test, but she was hysterical when the court ordered one. 15 years ago, I was 25, finishing my contract, and dating my girlfriend of 3 years, Natalie. Over time, she began acting increasingly strange. When I returned from a 2-month assignment, I was prepared to break up with her. But before I could, Natalie came over with some good news: she was pregnant. I asked how far along she was, and she said 5 weeks. I did the math and realized something didn't add up, so I broke it off with her. She tried to refuse the breakup, insisting the baby was mine. I calmly told her 2 things. First, I wanted a paternity test. Second, if the child turned out to be mine, we could discuss financial support and custody arrangements with lawyers. She rejected both requests and proceeded to tell everyone we knew that I was a deadbeat who had abandoned her and our unborn child. I told people the truth, that I had been on a 2-month assignment when the baby was conceived, but some still pressured me to do the decent thing. To avoid further drama, I housed her briefly and provided limited support. However, after consulting with a lawyer, I was warned that providing any ongoing support could be seen as an admission of paternity. So, I informed my friends of this and most backed off, except for one, who argued that charity couldn't be used against me legally. I told him if he was so certain, he could house her. He quickly dropped it after that. When the child, Emma, was born, I didn't even bother with the usual "she doesn't look like me" argument because, let's be real, most newborns just have squished faces anyway. I only saw the pictures Natalie sent me, accompanied by messages like, "Emma wants to know where daddy is," which I ignored. She still refused to take a paternity test but continued to show up unannounced with the baby. Eventually, it got so bad that I had to file a restraining order, RO. Fun fact: in my state, a permanent restraining order only lasts 2 years unless there's a violent crime involved. Apparently, showing up with a baby that isn't mine doesn't count as violent, so for the past 14 years, I've had to renew the RO every 2 years. The moment it lapses, Natalie reappears with my not child. In the meantime, I've moved on with my life. I found a wonderful woman, Kim, got married, and now have a 9-year-old son, Henry. Kim is well aware of the ongoing saga with Natalie and Emma. Every time the cycle starts up again, I give the same response. First, a paternity test, and second, if Emma is mine, I'll take custody and arrange financial support. Natalie always refuses, saying both are insulting. Recently, the situation escalated. This time, Emma showed up first, approaching Henry during a school zoo trip, claiming to be his big sister. Henry, knowing about stranger danger, ran to his teacher. I had to have a painful conversation with the teachers and other parents about my complicated history with Natalie and Emma, explaining that Emma was not my daughter. During this conversation, I accidentally referred to Emma as my not daughter more than once. After the group disbanded, one of the mothers approached me, saying that while Natalie was wrong for telling Emma I was her father, calling Emma my not daughter was cruel. I can see your point, but honestly, this 2-year cycle has been my reality for so long that making light of it is the closest I get to finding peace. To clarify a frequently asked question, in my state, the mother has to file a petition to establish paternity. The father cannot initiate the process. When Emma was born, there was a brief window of 1 month to request a test, but I was too focused on dealing with the restraining order and didn't think the paternity issue would continue to haunt me. And for those suggesting I file for custody to force a DNA test, I can't do that either. I've consulted multiple lawyers, and they all say the same thing. There are laws that protect children, and many of them exist for good reasons. Imagine a woman escaping from an abusive ex, finding out she's pregnant, and choosing not to put his name on the birth certificate to keep him out of her life. Years later, he discovers the child and tries to rope her back in through legal action. These laws prevent that, the legal maze of paternity and restraining orders. Natalie can simply refuse a paternity test, and the state has to let it go. There's a provision, though, if a father was involved enough to know about the birth, he could submit his DNA to the state within 30 days as a potential father. But that window closed a long time ago. The law is designed this way on purpose. In the eyes of family court, I'm a random person. I was never claimed as Emma's father. If you think the state wants all children to be claimed by their fathers and will happily run a DNA test whenever a potential father shows up, think again. Try calling the family court, claiming you want to be recognized as the father of some random single mother's child, and see how that goes. I'm exhausted from people acting like all I needed to do was fill out one form to end this nightmare. Please, just call a lawyer for a free consultation or ask for advice on a legal forum. It doesn't work that way. Update. I just got off the phone with my attorney. We have a preliminary hearing this week for a new restraining order, RO. We'll likely be issued a temporary RO, followed by another hearing for a permanent one. CPS, Child Protective Services, is investigating Natalie and Emma's living situation. The teacher's report carried a lot of weight, and my lawyer believes this could finally be the path to ending the madness. In family court, there's something called a guardian ad litem, a court-appointed guardian responsible for legal decisions regarding a minor. If one is appointed for Emma, we could ask this guardian to order a DNA test. This might actually resolve everything. Now, I feel like I need to explain my relationship with Natalie. When I got back from that 2-month assignment, I was already set on breaking up with her. Her, "Oh, I'm pregnant," announcement was never going to change my mind. In fact, I doubted she was pregnant for weeks. The last year of our relationship was filled with red flags. She began demanding that I check in constantly, insisting I only hang out with friends when she was present. She was also extremely jealous if I so much as seemed too friendly with other women, including waitresses. I worked a job that required long stints away from home, which she hated, but it kept me out of her reach for weeks at a time. About halfway through that final year, I realized I didn't miss her when I was gone. In fact, I was relieved to return to my cot after long hours of work, without having to think about her. When it turned out she actually was pregnant, I made it clear. With a paternity test, I would provide financial support, split custody, and co-parent, but nothing more. She wanted me to marry her, no questions asked, no test, just blind faith and devotion to her and the baby. To her, the paternity test was insulting. There was never going to be a relationship, and there was nothing to salvage. On the advice of my first lawyer, I set a hard rule: no test, no contact. Court update. The preliminary hearing for the new restraining order went well. Natalie and Emma were there, and we learned that Emma is currently living with her great-grandmother. She also has a guardian ad litem, meaning the court has appointed a legal guardian for her. My lawyer thinks this indicates that whatever was discovered in Natalie's home was severe enough to warrant removing Emma and placing her in the care of her great-grandmother, with the need for a legal guardian to handle decisions. There's finally a possibility that this long, painful saga could come to an end. We went through the usual process in court, passed restraining orders, all of it. At one point, my lawyer turned to Emma's representative and said we were ready to submit to a DNA test and finally put this issue to rest. The moment Natalie heard that, she looked like she was about to have a full-blown conniption. Her own lawyer had to urge her to stay quiet. Emma's representative accepted, and we were cheek-swabbed right there in the courthouse. A temporary restraining order was issued, and a second hearing was scheduled in the coming weeks for the permanent 2-year order. The order covers both of our immediate families. Oddly enough, Natalie has always been good at following court orders. We have about 4 weeks before we get the definitive test results back, but honestly, I'm not too worried either way. Some people in the past thought charity couldn't be used against me as proof of paternity. Well, that idea came from Jim, a friend I haven't spoken to in 10 years. Jim is gay and always hated Natalie, but he's also the type of guy who would give you the shirt off his back. He volunteered at a food pantry, and his protests about my situation mostly came from naivety, not self-interest. Paternity update. We got the test results late last week, and Emma's side received them too. As it turns out, I am not the father. Natalie had a major meltdown when she found out, which she heard from her grandmother Sylvia, who now has custody of Emma. Natalie's outburst included a full-blown tantrum on my front lawn, which violated the temporary restraining order. As a result, she's been arrested, and Sylvia has not bailed her out. Sylvia, through my lawyer, has offered her apologies for bankrolling Natalie's life for the past 15 years. I've only met Sylvia a few times when I was dating Natalie. I knew she had money, but I didn't realize how much influence she had in their lives. Sylvia communicated, also through my lawyer, which is allowed with the restraining order, that both she and Emma wanted to send me a letter of apology. I told my lawyer they could write whatever letters they wanted as long as it was the last communication we'd ever have. The permanent restraining order is almost certain to be granted now, given Natalie's violation of the temporary one. We still don't know the exact reason Emma was removed from Natalie's care or if Natalie has any underlying issues, but things seem to be finally moving towards a conclusion. Letter update. I received the letters last Friday after my lawyer reviewed them. Sylvia's letter mostly explained Natalie's difficult upbringing, which I already knew about. Natalie's father had run out on her, and her mother left Sylvia to raise her. It was the typical, "I did my best with what I had" story. Sylvia wrote that she and Emma would be fine and that, while she doesn't have FU money, she has enough to give Emma a solid start in life when she turns 18. Sylvia had been housing Natalie and Emma in a property she owned in the city while she lived about an hour north in the country. She sent Natalie monthly financial support for living expenses and only saw them on major holidays, birthdays, Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Sylvia said the photos she saw of the city house broke her heart, and she vowed not to enable Natalie anymore. Emma's letter was much more emotional. It started with the line, "Father who is not my father," which I found strange. She wrote about how Natalie told her that if she behaved, I would accept her. My acceptance, according to Natalie, depended entirely on Emma doing what she was told. Emma said that Sylvia had her in therapy now and that Natalie had told both of them I was dodging the DNA test using legal loopholes. Emma mentioned that when she saw me suggest the test in person, it made her feel like Natalie was right, that I would finally accept her. She said she felt happy and hopeful, but when the results came back, it was worse than never knowing at all. Emma apologized for scaring my son, Henry, whom she referred to as my brother who is not my brother. The letter had a strange, almost detached tone, like she was trying to come to terms with everything. Reading Emma's letter was painful, but both Sylvia and Emma promised not to contact me or my family again. Natalie is still in jail, and for the first time in 15 years, it feels like this might really be over. Conclusion. After 15 years of chaos, accusations, and legal battles, the truth finally came to light. The DNA test proved once and for all that I was not Emma's father, and with that revelation, it felt like a tremendous weight had been lifted. It wasn't just about clearing my name or proving that I hadn't abandoned a child, but about finally closing the door on a chapter that had stolen years of peace from my life. Natalie's outbursts, her manipulation, and her refusal to accept reality had driven us into a spiral of restraining orders, court hearings, and emotional turmoil. Emma, caught in the middle of it all, was left confused and hurt by a narrative that had been built on lies. But as the dust settled, it became clear that the real tragedy was not just the false claim of paternity, but the brokenness of Natalie's life and how it had deeply affected Emma. Sylvia's apology and Emma's letter made me realize just how much they too were victims of Natalie's deceit. In some way, they were trying to pick up the pieces of a shattered life, one that had spiraled out of control years before I even entered the picture. Emma's apology, though painful to read, showed that she was beginning to understand the truth of her situation, and while it didn't erase the past, it allowed me to finally make peace with it. For me, this chapter is now closed. The restraining orders will remain in place, and I can finally focus on my own family, on Kim, on Henry, and on the life we've built together. There will always be a part of me that feels sorrow for Emma, who was led to believe a lie for so long, but I can only hope that Sylvia's care and the therapy she's receiving will help her move forward. In the end, what mattered most was standing my ground and insisting on the truth, even when it felt like the world was against me. The ordeal may have consumed years of my life, but the clarity it brought has allowed me to finally put this nightmare behind me. Now, it's time to move on, for good. Thank you very much for watching to the story so far. I suggest you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss tomorrow's stories.